Good evening, everybody. This is Paul, N0T for the Front Range 6-meter group. And tonight we have Paul, N2EME, who's going to give us a nice talk about what to do with SDRs and some of the questions you guys may have. So with that, Paul, I'm going to let you run with it.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to shared screen. And we want to share this screen here. Okay, you should all have the screen that says how to integrate an SDR popping up. So some of these slides, some of you will have seen before, but I'm trying to put things in a little bit of an order. And the way this particular Zoom talk started was Paul called me and said, "Can you put something together as a step-by-step guide?" Because there were so many people texting into and quite happily emailing into the group saying, "How do you do this?" Or "I'm stuck at this little bit. What do I do now?" And we'd answer them all individually, and they get going. But Paul said, "Why can't we do something where we do all of that in one talk?" So we're going to start a little bit at the beginning on some things that some of you will have seen before, but how to integrate an SDR. Kirk, N0KK, sent me this picture for a talk, these two pictures for a talk that I did for his club, the Twin City DX Club, a few days ago. On the left, you have his 7610, IC 7610, and you can see 1 hertz steps, and the station he's looking for is a very weak CW station here. Don't bother leaning in too close to your monitors because it's not there. You can't see it. Kurt runs dual receive, so he runs an SDR with SDR console as well as his 7600. This shot here is the station he was looking for on the AirSpy HS Plus Discovery and SDR console. These are running together. He's running as a second receiver. Even I can count the dots and dashes there and work out some form of CW by sight, let alone by ear. But on the ICOM, he couldn't hear anything or see anything. There's no way that a little cheap SDR is better than his ICOM. So why can we do that? Simple. It's the software. SDR Console is doing all of the work. So when I first did the SDR switch range, well, redid the SDR switch range, Bill, ND0 Bravo, he laid out all the PCBs and did all the new changes and everything for the switches. And I just had 2 very simple switches, the basic 3BNC SDRs, where you received on the SDR on your SDR console, you transmitted on your rig. Bill told me, no, we need the RX in, RX out, and with that you can receive on both your rig and on SDR console. And I said, no, Bill, everybody knows that SDR console is better than most people's rigs, so therefore we just need this, the 3. To which Bill informed me that he has 15 master's degrees in electronic engineering and I'm an idiot. So he went ahead and he made the one that allows for dual receive. I can tell you the ones that I sell most days are the ones with dual receive. Nobody wants the ones that I wanted, and Bill was right. So what I think is a great advantage is being able to receive on both your SDR and your current radio. And this has been a little chat going on the 6-range, Front Meter 6-range group. And a couple of people are somebody asked, I think it was Jim, AB3CV, asked, well, is it going to help with my noise? I've got a high noise figure. And Paul commented on the fact that living down in Denver, when he had the antennas on his daughter's apartment, it was SDR console that got through all the noise. And Jay, K0GU, commented that he's got a Flex 6600 and he's only running HD SDR. He's not even running SDR console. And when there's noise, his RSPs receive what his Flex doesn't. And the big thing is when there's noise, Hassan will tell you that when there's no noise, his 7300 is equal to all of his SDRs that he's testing. But as soon as some noise comes into it, then SDR console does its business and you can decode things. You might not even see them, but you can decode things. So that got me along the lines of we have to integrate them so that you have both radios working together. Some of you may remember when we were at N2EME, pardon me, we had set up a 303 receive. So we were always on 313 or 260. But if any of the FFMA guys called us, they knew to call on 303. And it didn't matter what was happening here on a crowded band on 313, we could jump over and work them on 303. Now, we had a flex radio there, and not everybody's got a flex radio. So how can you do this without a flex radio? That we go into in a bit. If we go to this, there's 3 ways you can set an SDR up. One of them is a pan adapter, one of them is an IF tap, and one of them is receiving directly on the SDR. Pan adapters are pretty pictures and, to use an English expression, about as much use as a chocolate fire guard. They give you pretty pictures and nothing else. An IF tap is slightly better. You're receiving and able to work things off your SDR, but you are going through all of the stuff inside your radio and only listening to the IF rather than listening to your SDR. And obviously receiving directly on the SDR is the best way to go because you're making use of what your SDR's got. You're taking the raw signal from your SDR. And a lot of you have seen my favorite picture, which is showing my station using an RTL, a little NULEC $35 RTL. I'm receiving CW and SSB straight to my speaker. So if anybody comes up on CW, I can hear it, but obviously I don't understand it. If anybody comes up on CW, on SSB, I can hear them over and work out who they are. And I've got 260 MSK, 275 Q65, 313 US FT8, FT4, and 323 EU FT8, all decoding at once. So these are not just there for pretty pictures. These are actually running to individual instances of WSJT. And if I click on any of these to select them, they will move over to this corner here and I'll be able to work them. This bottom piece here, that is showing me the entire band of what's happening. So you can see on this particular day, there were lots of CW, lots of SSB, and an absolute pipe of digital stuff. And again, RTL dongle USB, the cheapest possible RTL you can get from NULEC. 3 different types of SDRs. We're just going to quickly do this, but we're only really interested in the receive only. So we have receive only SDRs, such as the NULEC, the one there that we mentioned, the AirSpy R2, which is the one that Paul likes a lot. And Hassan has done some brilliant work. If you look on the Why Do I Need an LNA page on SDR Console, Hassan has put an awful lot of work in showing you how to set the AirSpy up, as well as some videos he's done for Paul's channel. This is the AirSpy HF Plus Discovery, which was probably the best HF receiver I have ever used. I don't have an RSPDX, and I think the RSPDX may take that title soon. And when I travel, if I pick up an SDR to go with me, it's always this, the FunCube Dongle Pro Plus. It goes from 0 to 1296 and is my to-go SDR. Then we've got the receive and transmit ones. So we've got the Flex, we've got the Anon range, and we've got the that's the baby Anon, which is the Hermes. And then over here we've got the new radios from the big boys, the Yaesu, ICOM, etc., which are SDR receives. Disadvantage with these is most of them don't run on SDR console. They only run on their own software. And as you saw from the picture with Kirk at the top, SDR console is what does all the work. So all we're going to be really interested in is the receive only range. And again, we just discovered them or discussed them. This is an interesting one. This takes you from 1500 megs as your top up to 3 gigahertz. So it also is a transmit and receive, which is interesting. And as you can see over here, which one? Well, that depends what you want to do. Just like your normal rig, there isn't one that does everything. So you have to choose which one you need for which frequency. I do all of this on a little computer. And this cost me $159 from Amazon. It comes with Windows 11 Pro, 256 gig drive with a 16 gig of RAM. And the reason I do it on this is because if I can do it on a little cheap computer, none of you have got any excuse for not going to and having given it a go. It's nothing special. Another thing I like about it is the size of it. I mean, 1 inch by 3.5 by 3.5. It's great for when you're traveling, or like Jamie K6NGN, this is his to-go box. So this is his 2 meter to-go box, and you can see he's got a little NUC computer, one of those that I just showed you. They're called NUCs. He's gone for a far better one, but there's his computer. There's his SDR switch. Then he comes in through a pin diode into a ANR LNA, into a bandpass filter, and into his R2. That's an SPY R2. And he's also got a little hockey puck in there, which does the GPS for timing, etc. And it's just, this is a perfect good use for a little box like this, because you see he's got all his connections on. He's got his monitor, his mouse, in his other USB points. He can plug them in there. And again, absolutely wonderful setup. So it's all in the software. There's lots of different software out there, and some people only like to work on Linux or work on Windows, and they ask me, so I need some software as good as SDR Console that works on Apple, on Mac. And I explained to them there isn't any. Next question. When I'm in Italy, I wish those damn Italians would speak either French or English, because I don't understand Italian. I only understand French and English. But unfortunately, they don't. So I have to speak Italian. And when it comes to the SDR world, you have to speak Windows. Go and spend the $159, buy yourself a little Windows computer, and you'll have the best software possible. So how do we get all this to work? Remember, we want to integrate the SDR. As it says here, don't worry. This is after the weekend. All of this information will be available on sdrswitch.com. If you go to the software page, there'll be a step-by-step guide to each different piece of software. And the next thing I'm going to say, while I'm going through the software, I'm going to go through very quickly through the software. But any questions, please interrupt and say, how do we do this? Because this is what this whole one is about tonight. The main three pieces of software that or four pieces that we're going to use are SDR Console, which is how your SDR talks to the outside world. OmniRig, which is by Alex V3NEA, which is how your rig talks to SDR, how it talks to SDR Console. VAC, which is how we get the sound from SDR Console to WSJT. And WSJT is obviously, we play with this every time we do digital. We all know how this works. Those of you who were here before the meeting saw Paul showing that his remote setup at Haswell, he could just click on the waterfall on SDR Console, change bands, everything. It's all done. His radio and SDR Console all work as one. Now, there's another couple of programs, CW Skimmer, which again is by Alex, and JT Skimmer. And JT Skimmer is an interesting program that Alex has just written. What it does, it allows you to decode all of the WSJT modes at once. And you can see it says up here, FT8, and I left it running for a few hours on 28 megs, just for a picture. And it's decoded 18,649. One really good thing of this is it's taking the raw signal. It's not taking anything from SDR Console, which does a lot of work, or does all the work. It's taking the raw signal from your SDR, and it's great for comparing receivers, because you can set a couple of different SDRs up, and it will tell you at the end of the day, well, I only recorded 50 people and I got 500. Well, okay, what's the problem? I'm not going to just go into that deep tonight. We'll do that at a future one. Maybe even be lucky enough that Alex will do the talk for that one. So we're just going to cover the main ones here. The other thing is, how do you get your SDR to talk to and your radio to work as one? You need an SDR switch. And this is how you connect things together. We'll see this a little bit later on. There are several on the market. And I will tell you that please do not buy this one unless you want to blow your radio up. I think the measurements are on the SDR Switch website, and they weren't done by me. All the measurements on that site are generally done by other people. That way I have no bias on it. And I think on one of them, they had 232-to-1 SWR. So please don't buy that. And I've nothing against, you can choose whichever one you want, but I'd rather you didn't blow your radio up. This one up here is the MFJ, which everyone's familiar with. The sad thing is on 432 megahertz, it has a 19 dB insertion loss. So imagine turning your stereo down from 100 down to 1. That's what you're doing to your signals coming in. This is a really nice one from Jan, from QRO.cz. It's 0 to 70 megahertz, a really nice design. Definitely recommend it. The only thing when you order from him is if you decide this is the one you want, make sure you order all the pieces. So you're not going backwards and forwards, realizing you forgot to order several of the things that go inside it. And obviously my boxes, sdrswitch.com, which were designed by Bill, ND0 Bravo. And we'll look at some figures on those when we get to the bit on Nano, which is what you're all here to see anyway. I obviously recommend that, but I also, because that's my box, but I also put all the information on there so that you can realize and make your own mind up. And remember, insertion loss matters. That's one of the big things you're looking for when you're looking at connecting your radio and an SDR switch together. Here's a very quick basic diagram and a picture of a very, very simple setup. This is the 4-port RX in, RX out, which Bill told me I had to build, and I was having this one whether I wanted it or not. So as you'll see on the diagram over here, the signal comes in from your antenna, comes out of the RX out into your LNA, into a splitter, and one side goes back to your rig, and the other side goes through your SDR, and again back to your computer. Then when you're going to transmit, on the actual picture, you would come in here, go into here, into the splitter, one goes back to the rig, one goes to the computer. When you transmit, or if you disconnect the power to this, so if you lose power, the signal comes from here to the transmit. So from TX in to the antenna. That way, you're not going to blow anything up. You suddenly have a power cut halfway through transmitting. This will flick over. All of this is protected. LNA. You can see I've got an LNA there. Well, here's an LNA. And the most visited page on the SDRswitch.com website is Hassan's page. Why do I need an LNA? That has more visits than nearly every other page put together. So why do I need an LNA? Well, back in the old days, you needed it because your piece of coax was a load of rubbish. So up at your antenna, you would have, you'd put the LNA up at your antenna, and it had lots of gain, and it took care of all that loss in your coax, and you still got a signal out in the shack. Great. These days, we can all afford coax. I mean, good Andrews coax is a couple of dollars a foot. I mean, it's so cheap. There's no excuse for running bad coax. So now you can move your LNA into the shack. Yes, we'll do the disclaimer that the LNA should always be at the tower. There's no excuse. The only place for an LNA is to mount it at the very top of the tower next to your antennas. So that's great. I live in New England in February. Not many of my friends want to climb to the top of my tower and change my LNA when it blows up just before the contest in February. Reality is that for a lot of us, we're willing to take the noise loss that the coax, a noise figure that the coax gives us, to have the convenience that if something goes wrong, we can actually fix it rather than being off the air for months at a time. So we're back to here. This is the NULEC. It's $35, and it covers 20 megahertz to 4 gigahertz, all in one $35 LNA. And again, the reason we're putting the LNA in line is we're not caring about the gain. This is the number we're looking at. We want to set the noise figure for our entire receive chain. So when we go back to this one, this LNA here is not only setting the noise figure for the SDR, it's also setting the noise figure for the icon. It's the most important part of your receive chain. So this one has got a 0.8, or they say it's got a 0.8 noise figure and covers 20 to 4 gigs. Bandpass filter. Here's a nice 6-meter one from SV9, and here's a nice one from DSRs. DSRs do some very, very nice bandpass filters. They do one for 6 meters, I think maybe $45, $50. And it's a triple, it's the same as this, it's a triple coil one. This is a SAW filter, which is wonderful. But a SAW filter has got a little bit of loss in it, maybe 2 dB loss. But if you put it here after the LNA, then you don't care about the loss. You've got so much gain from your LNAs that often you want to get rid of the gain. Paul Wade, who's a seriously smart guy, W1GHZ, was giving a talk at the conference I was at the weekend. And I bought 3 of these little LNAs from him. That is the smallest of the Altoid tins. And to give you an idea, that little active device there is 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters. And hence I wasn't building these. I bought them from Paul. And you can see his noise figures here. I leant over his shoulder and took a picture because he was testing lots of these. On 144, this has got a 0.46 dB. On 902, it's got a 0.60 dB noise figure. And on 1296, it's got a 0.57 dB noise figure. They are seriously good noise figures. ARR, that's the one we're all used to. I like Jay's things very much. And you get very, very good customer service from Jay. You're going to blow an LNA up, a preamp up. There's no doubt about that. At some point in time, something's going to happen. You will blow it up. It will have nothing to do with what you've done, unless you're an idiot like me and shorted one out, as I did the other day. And you're not even going to realize why you've blown it up. You just accept something happened outside and maybe it's a thunderstorm. You can send it back to Jay and he repairs them very, very inexpensively.
Hey,
Now, well,
hey,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I did that. I blew up mine, but I didn't have a a sequencer, which I got from the guys down in Florida. But I didn't before I got a sequencer. I was just trying to switch it, and sure enough, with my amplifier and everything else, and this thing was close to the amplifier, it destroyed it. And I sent it back, and they turned it around like in about 3 days, and it was like, I don't know, $25 to fix it. So like
Yeah,
these guys are
I can tell you, Paul, that I don't fix if I got an ARR that's broken. I don't fix it myself because it costs me more to buy the device than it does to get Jay to fix it. And just going back to this picture, just here we go. On the back of this, just as Paul's on about not blowing things up, the connections on the back of this, one of them goes out to your amplifier. So your amplifier can't turn on until your switching circuit has gone into receive. And there's another connector on the back of here, which comes round to your LNA, which turns the power off to your LNA. When you're going to transmit, it turns the power off, which again is another way of saving it. Now, Paul gave this talk, and a brilliant talk, and convinced me to buy 3 of these from him. And then he mentioned, after he got my money, he mentioned this one here. And this one uses one of the devices that he was mentioning during the talk, and how he felt it was very good. This particular device was very good. And you can see the gain figures up here. Unfortunately, I don't have his noise figures for it, but he said they were similar to his $40 one. And you can see the gain levels were up at 20s for, where we want to be. That's 500 megs. So where most of us are going to be is, down here. This on eBay was $12. And it comes with a little battery inside. So when you want to just throw something outside at the tower to see if things are working properly, you can just take this one out, plug it in, and it'll run off its own power for a while. But from what Paul Wade, who is a seriously smart guy, was saying, the noise figure on this and the gains on this are about the equivalent to what he put all of this effort into designing this. So I was very lucky at the conference that this poor guy got stuck with me for quite some time, and we tested everything that I took down there. At the moment on here is testing a brand new SSB Electronics, one of the 750 watt SSB 6-meter LNAs. He was testing that for me. Up here you can see there are 2 different ones available that look very similar from NULEC. Both the same price, One of them covers 0 to 150 megs. The other covers 20 to 4 gigahertz. So I got Greg to measure them. And I've got to move you guys out of the way because I can't read my numbers. This is the 0 to 150. This is the noise figure. This is the gain. So you can see on the 0 to 150 at 6 meters, we're looking at 2.9 dB noise figure. Your SDR or even your radio has probably got about a 3.1 dB noise figure to start with. So you're not really gaining much from this particular one. Yes, it's got some gain, but again, we're not caring about gain. What matters for this whole setting things up is the noise figure. So then we went to the 0 to 50, 0 to 4 gigahertz one. The noise figure on 6 meters drops down to 1.0, which is about the same as an ARR LNA. 0.8, 0.7, even up on 1296, it's only got a 1.2 gigahertz dB noise figure. Remember, what we want to do is get the initial noise figure as low as possible. And we've got more than enough gain. In fact, we've got 28 dB of gain on 6 meters, way more than we need. So we put an attenuator in line. And because we've got too much power, this was one that KA1W just sent me the other day to look at. He's playing with it and testing it at the moment for us. And it's a nice little one where you've got the push buttons. It gives you a readout. It's $27 off Amazon. And so far he's enjoying it, but he hasn't given me the full, okay, this is what I like about it. This one's a JFW Industries one, and they go for about $45 on eBay. This one is another eBay one. This is what Hassan is using for his tests. This one John designed, and if you look on the website, the SDRswitch.com website, there's actually a link. So if you feel like building one, all the information's there on how to build you this very nice one from John. Or you can put a fixed value LNA in. You're probably better with an adjustable because different bands require different amounts of attenuation. But again, if you go to Hassan's page on SDRswitch.com, the Why Do I Need an LNA page, he explains all of this for you. So let's get back to the software. And again, don't worry, very shortly, all of this will be on the software page of SDRswitch.com. I've just been so busy with Zoom talks for the last couple of weeks, I haven't had a chance to do it. And this is where anybody please cut in and say, I'm at that point now, but I don't know how to do it. So SDR Console is the top of the range software. We get to test out beta software, not even beta software. We get to test out the software that the developer is working on to find the bugs. And when you find a bug, you send it back and he fixes the bug. And then in his commercial grade stuff, he can then let his commercial customers have bug free. It's free for you to use, although I do ask if you like it, send him a donation via PayPal because he does put a lot of work into this. We have to get everybody to talk to each other. This is where OmniRig comes in. This is by Alex V3NEA, November Echo Alpha. And with this, SDR Console, which is part of this screen here, is talking to OmniRig. That's SDR Console. And also your WSJT is talking to OmniRig. You see, I've highlighted this up top here. I ran into a problem. I spent 2 days trying to get all of this to talk to each other. I've done it before. I know what I'm doing. I've done this. Why won't it all talk to each other? And Alex jumped on my computer and told me in his Ukrainian accent that I'm an idiot. And I had this set as my rig as being the 7300 and not Omni rig. And so it kept telling me everything was busy. Again, how to set all this up step by step is on the website. This is the one that we get most of the questions about. This is virtual audio cable, how you get audio from SDR console to WSJT or wherever else you want it. I will tell you, when you initially set it up, open the program in administrator mode, go up to this top corner here and just click add, click, add, click, add, click, and give yourself 9 or 10 different cables. Once you've done that, you're never going to need to go back into it. Just run it normal in normal mode, but it will only let you add cables when you're in admin mode. So the simple one we have problems with is you have to have SDR console in the same audio, the same virtual audio cable as you have your input WSJT. So output SDR console must match input WSJT. Once you've done that, that's it. It's solved. But we get more questions about that than anything else. And as you can see on the picture here, channel 6, line 6, line 6. Everybody is talking to each other. But that's the one where people don't quite understand that you've got to set each of these receivers. WSJT, not if you need me to tell you how to set that up, but again, there's a step-by-step guide to setting it up on WSJT on the website, and it tells you how to do the cables, etc. So you've got SDR switch set up, and you can see this bottom corner. It's looking at the rig. It's looking at the ICOM in this case. So anything I do on the front of the ICOM happens in SDR console. I turn the dial, SDR console turns the dial. I change the band, SDR console changes the band. You have now, in those half an hour that we've been speaking, you now have integrated SDR console with your rig. There's also a section on how you can add all the receivers to it. And these are what the Flex people would call slicers. So you've got 7 slicers here, and each of them is receiving at exactly the same time. You're not just looking at pretty pictures, you are actually receiving. So we go back to the beginning. You could set 2 of these up and be doing what we were doing with the Flex, watching 313 and watching 313, 303, 313, and not missing anybody who's on the expeditions. And this applies to any band. And again, we have all the multiple instances of WSJT. So this, and it was actually, they were taken when I did the original picture. All of these instances are sending out to all of these instances of WSJT all at once. And again, I'm using an RTL and a cheap computer. Nothing special.
Hey, Paul.
Yes, sir.
Just one more thing, just so everyone understands. When you have all those slices and you have like you're listening on, let's say, WSJT for on 260, and you're also listening on 313. You can have 2 instances, like one of WSJT, or you can have multiple WSJTs, or you have JTDX like I do. And you need a separate audio cable for each one of those, which is different, so that you can send the audio to the individual devices. So I say device, so I'm talking about WSJTs. So that if you want to listen on MSK 144, say on 260, you pick one of those cables for that, and then you could use number 2 for FT8 on the JTDX. But just a little thing that you got to do if you want to hear them all at the same time.
Yeah. So Paul pointed out there, I went back to show the other picture while he was talking. each of these slicers, each of these receivers has its own VAC channel, its own cable, cable 1, cable 2, cable 3, cable 4. And you match that cable with each individual instance of WSJT or JTDX. So as long as they all match, it all works together. It doesn't send the signal to the wrong place. And it's quite simple. Just make sure everything matches. Multiple instances of WSJT. Here's another one we get lots of questions about. So you've got the different slicers of WSJT open here, of the different receivers open in SDR Console, and you want to send over to multiple instances of WSJT. You can see on my desktop, I've got them all named with something different. That's easily done. If you click on the icon and go down to the bottom of the pop-up, you have something called properties. When you go in, and you'll have all been into there to look at it for one reason or another. When you go into properties, you have something called general. In the general, you name what you want the box on the screen here to be called. So in this case, the IC7300. Great. And then you wonder why it doesn't work. Well, you've only done half the job. You then have to go into shortcuts and you have to put the rig name in. So in this case, IC7300. And here's where I make mistakes and others make mistakes. Just here, there's a space. So it's .exe space and then the rest of the rig name. And on your screen, that can be very difficult to see. And the amount of times I've set it up and I've not left that space there. As long as you leave that space here, when you put the rig name in, you'll click on this shortcut and it will work. And each of these is to an individual slice. Remember, all of this is going to work as one. So we go back to Kirk's initial picture that he sent me. You have to see them to work them. One of the conversations I say earlier on the website on Paul's chat was, how does it work with noise? And I think K0J, K0GU said that it works better with than his Flex does when there's noise. SDR Console. SDR Console is doing all the work here, guys. Bill, ND0 Bravo, you've heard me tell the story of how he worked his last FFMA grid square using his Flex as a transmitter and a $35 SDR with SDR Console as his receiver, because his Flex wouldn't receive the station he was trying to work, but his cheap little RTL with SDR Console did. So I'm a big advocate of, and this is what I haven't gone into how to set things up individually, other than a couple of ones where people make mistakes. You can go through the website, you can ask me, you can easily work it out yourself. If not, dual receive is what you should be aiming for. You should be aiming for transmitting on your normal rig, because we've all got good enough transmitters, but receiving on both your SDR with SDR Console and your radio. And between them, one should get through the noise that we get on 6 meters. This was a little picture I did for the guys over at the Twin City DX Association. And as we just saw, this LNA is not really the right one to use. The 20 up to 4,000 is the LNA because of the noise figure. But I set this up as a little thing to show them that with 3 SDRs, they can have one SDR on 10, one on 15, one on 20. And they could also have their normal transceiver on, say, 40. And with 3 inches of SDR Console open, you can watch and decode all of those 4 bands at once. And obviously we don't care about the 7 dB loss in this splitter because the LNA is going to have more gain than we care about. Okay, that was a very quick talk through. Probably took longer than I was expecting. So questions, please. And don't go away. We've got the important part coming up next.
Yeah, this is Jim Miller, AB3CV. I had a question. Your little computer, I have a NUC also. With that grade of NUC, how many instances of WSJT seem to run okay?
I've had 4 running. That's a new NUC. I've got another NUC, which is the one I'm on. The NUC I'm on at the moment, talking to you guys, normally lives in the shack. But I was trying out the baby NUC, which is that tiny one, because when I'm travel, that's what I'm going to take with me for radio. Yeah. And I've had 4 instances of WSJT running with also audio coming to the speakers on the 2 different, on CW and SSB. I'm not a computer guy. I can just tell you it worked at my end.
That's fine. One other question is that I was the guy who was asking the questions about performance and noise and so forth. What sort of, I looked at the information I found so far from Hassan, trying to figure out what, if any, settings he sets on the noise blanker and the noise reduction and so forth, and what impact they have, if any, on WSJT performance, positive or negative. I haven't found anything yet.
Hassan did a video for the R2, and I think Paul's going to give him an email and say, Hassan, can you give us a video on the RSPDX of the settings? Because Hassan's working on that at the moment. He put hours and hours in getting the different settings, which is why one of the reasons I recommend the R2, because he's put the work in. We don't have to. But hopefully Paul's going to get him back, because that's a great video that he's done. It will vary, Jim. I will tell you that from listening to Paul and listening to other people, the noise blanker in SDR Console is amazing, and the noise reduction. In fact, I was talking to the gentleman who worked on Power SDR thesis, which is what the Annans run on and what Flex originally ran on. And he was telling me that Simon's libraries for SDR Console are far better than he uses when he's writing for the Annans and Flex. Now, Bill, ND0 Bravo, sent a picture through of rain scatter. And on his Flex 6700, the screen looked a little bit bad, but not much. You know, it looks, okay, this is not having a good day, but it's not too bad. And it wasn't decoding any of the WSJT signals. SDR Console with an RTL looked absolutely wiped out. It was just bright pink. You couldn't tell anything was there. And you look over at your decodes and it's decoding as if nothing was happening.
And that's with no special settings on noise blanker or noise reduction?
He probably just turned it on and had a play with it. This is going back quite some time before we had lots of information. And so he was just using an RTL, which is a set. Actually, back in those days, Lance was at Christmas Island, and he was using a $35 RTL and an ARR LNA to do EME on 6 meters. And those of you who've done EME will know 6 meters is the hardest band to do EME on.
Hey, Paul.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick here, just to answer Jim's question a little bit. On the noise blanker, there's a little slider under settings on the noise blanker, and you just move the slider until you start seeing the display kind of moving a little bit. And that's where I always set it. So like, depending on what your noise level is like, because my noise level changes when I was downtown. And so on a particular day, I would move it up and down. So you just set it to where you're starting to get some of the blanking effect. You don't want to turn it all the way up, otherwise it blanks everything out. And as far as the noise reducer or the noise reduction, that that I usually set that around maybe a 3. It's the NR1 I'm talking about. It's the only one I use, and it seems to work out really good, especially if when I'm trying to work MSK 144. So that's my own experience.
As I think I mentioned in the email chain, Jim, the biggest problem with SDR Console is it gives you choices. Your rig gives you on-off volume for most people. SDR Console gives you choices to fight the problem with, but it also means you've got to put some time in finding out what works at your environment, in your environment. With my normal, TS2000, I turn it on. Whatever I see is what I've got, and there's not a lot I can do to help. I really hope at your station you end up running dual RX because you've got a great radio, and doing comparisons between the two, and you run them both.
That's what I finally got almost today. Got everything running, and I found I didn't have a splitter, so I've got my AR preamp, and I've got a splitter on the way. It'll be here Monday, and I'll be able to run the K4 in parallel with the SDR, and I'll start for performance differences.
Perfect. And that I would say you've got a great radio. You've got the K4D, and it'll be interesting to see, from my point of view, if you keep sending to the group on what SDR Console does to help you at your noise level.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Yeah, question. Good evening, Paul. This is K5ND. The question I have is, you've got the 7 receivers up there. What is happening with the transmitter that's connected to SDR Console through OmniRig? What is it doing when you have 7 receivers up there?
Absolutely. And those who don't know, Jim, K5ND, writes a really good blog on different parts of amateur radio. So they're well worth just checking out his blogs online. There's a couple of ways of doing this. And one of them is that your rig is always talking to SDR Console. So the frequencies will move. And one way of doing it is you receive directly off this frequency, or because there's a splitter, you're receiving off both of them. I set up an extra instance of WSJT just for the radio. So the radio is going to its own instance of WSJT anyway. What mode it's on depends on what you have selected on its own instance of WSJT. And the reason that I do that is because we've all worked out earlier on in it, I'm not the brightest guy around. And I'll click on something and mess something up, and all my receivers will go onto one frequency instead of being all nicely scattered around the band. So I found I make less mistakes myself if I keep a separate instance of WSJT running for the 7300 in this case, for the radio. But it doesn't matter if you receive it on this instance of WSJT or the rig's instance. You've received it. Move on to the next sequence. So very often I'll find that I'm not actually receiving it on the 7300 if it's a noisy day. On a quiet day, the 7300 and the SDR are neck and neck. They're the same. You won't notice the difference. But when you start hitting noise like Jim and Paul have, that's when you notice the difference. So I'll get a decode on 313 on this slice here, and that instance of WSJT. I'll just put the information over into my 7300 version and move on. So and again, this varies on how you set on which SDR switch you buy, and which brand you buy and how they're set up. But on the SDRswitch.com RX in, RX out, you are receiving on your 7300, your rig, the same time as you are receiving on SDR. Does that answer your question?
In a way, yeah. What I'm just using WSJT to one, the receiver goes in one side, and then the output goes directly to the transmitter, rather than linking up SDR and the Omni rig. I haven't played around with that. That looks attractive, primarily for the reasons that you were giving, Paul. Of I'm always prone to make whatever mistake is possible. I can generally do that, and when you're bouncing around things like that, that certainly happens. So I'm monitoring all those, but I'm not necessarily. I have to change the transmitter frequency separately, I guess. If I see something coming up on 323, for example, because I am monitoring that, I'll click on that, but that does not. Doesn't change my transmitter frequency. And so I have to go and do that myself. So I'm going to have to play around with the Omni rig and see what we can do with that.
There's a great, I'm going to slide back a few slides to cover that, Jim, because this is what tonight's about. Tonight's a question and answer for us. Okay, when you come over to, this is it. This is your Omni rig in SDR Console. This is what pops up in SDR Console. Tracking, you can have your SDR track your radio, or your radio track your SDR, or both. What I suggest to you there is do not have your radio control SDR console. Only have SDR console control your radio. So what you do is you click off so these aren't highlighted, and that way you can click on any of these and your radio will change frequency. But if you suddenly jump over and start turning the dial, because nothing is going to happen to any of these. They're going to stay exactly where they are. But if you suddenly see a station come up on 313 and you're listening to somebody on 125, just click on here, and there's a pop-up will pop up here. Click on the pop-up. Your rig will change that frequency.
Okay.
But you won't mess things up by turning the dial on your rig.
Yeah, I need to do some more investigation into that and the experimentation. But very cool. Thank you very much for that explanation and the insight into all the little tricks needed with Omni rig as well. Thank you, Paul.
No, you're welcome. I got Alex, the guy who wrote it, jumped on my computer, and because I've used Omni rig many a time and I could not realize what I was messing up. Anyone else?
Paul, this is Mike, W3IP. For those of us who live in FM 19 or FM 20, what is the pick of the litter today as far as strong signal handling in these SDRs?
Very simple, Mike. You live in the worst radio place possible in the USA, and my suggestion is Florida.
Okay.
If I can be honest on this, there's not that much difference because it's SDR consoles doing all the work. Hassan, depends on the band, again, what you're looking for. The R2, if you're looking for just something 6 meters and up, the R2 is fantastic. That's the AirSpy R2. For HF, the AirSpy HF Discovery is the best I've ever played with yet. And it has 2 meters and up, but it's useless. Just don't even consider it for that. It doesn't receive on those frequencies. It's converting down to them and it doesn't work. But it really is a case of I will tell the DX, the RSP DX. When I can afford one, I'm going to buy one because I'm watching all my friends playing on them and watching their stations. And I'm going, wow, the earlier RSPs weren't as good as this DX. They've taken a massive step forward. But a lot of it, you've got the worst location in the country. And we both know that. In your case, you may even have to put the bandpass filter before the LNA. The rest of us can put it after it, and don't care about the little bit. You may have to take the loss and put the bandpass filter before the LNA just because of where you live. You've got so many strong signals coming in from everywhere. It really, I mean, the RTL, okay. The RTL probably won't work that good where you are on a lot of the bands on 6 meters, because you've got, I remember Jim's location in Philadelphia on 6 meters and it was hash everywhere. You may have to go up to the R2. For a lot of us where we live in the quiet, the RTL works. The big difference is like the FunCube is a 16-bit, and some of them are 12 bits, some of them are 8 bits. I'm not a computer guy, but the more bits you've got tend to mean it works better. So look for something with a higher bit rate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Paul, can I show the guy something?
Yeah, let me stop share.
All right.
Paul, while he's doing that, on OmniRig settings, how did you get to that that other handshake back and forth?
Okay, we'll go with Paul, then I'll take the screen back over and we'll go back there if that's okay with you, Marv.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, guys, what I discovered was and one of my friends actually told me about it, and I decided to take a look at it. I'm using Win for ICOM, their suite, and it's commercial. It's like $60 one-time charge or something. But what it does for me is it acts like a what do you call it? It allows me to send the same frequency information to multiple programs. Okay, so for example, if I'm running, let's say, WSJT or JTDX, let me go back just one little port here. Let me go back to here. Okay, so I'm using a 7300. Now, just so you know, that he also has a Win for Yaesu, and he may have a Yaesu for Ken or a Win for Kenwood. I'm not sure, but he's got the other ones. But it all looks the same. But I'm using the 7300 here as my transmitter. Okay, and I got it connected, on COM32, and that's how I was talking to my computer. Over here, I've got this I don't know what you want to call it, but it's like a Swiss Army knife, and it has all these different COM ports that you can send the same information to. Now, this is different than what Paul was saying. Paul was saying not to make it go with just switch with SDR. I've got it going both ways. Okay, so if I change the frequency here on this here, it changes it on the transmitter as well. Okay, and if I change it on the transmitter to something else here, I'm going to try to change the transmitter if I can remember how to do that.
Change bands. Just change bands.
All right, I'll just change band. Okay, I'll go over here to. I think I got this window open. That's why it won't close. Let me just close this for a second. All right, and if I change bands on the radio, it changes SDR. So I get kind of the best of both worlds. I'm playing around with it. So all I'm saying is it's very easy to do this, but this is the only software program I found. It's like I say, a Swiss Army knife, and I have the world around this program. And it sends the same. I'll just go back to I'll go back to this. I'll show you how this is so cool. I'm using OmniRig. Okay, so OmniRig is what it's talking to on SDR Console. All right, and I just get it COM32. I also have AC log. So the logging program gets the frequency and the mode from the transmitter. So it automatically fills all that stuff in for me. I don't have to worry about it. It tracks that. On JTDX, it automatically goes straight in at 19.2. WSJT, I don't have it plugged in. I didn't select a port for it because I don't need it right now. But if I want to run a separate instance of WSJT, say to listen to say MSK 144 at the same time as I'm running JTDX on FT8, I could do that. And I also have an extra port over here which I can send to some other piece of software. So it is just amazing what this cheap piece of software costs, and it's supported. And if you have a problem, there's a guy who will fix it. Over here, I'm sending it over to the a Commander program, and the Commander program sends the same frequency information over to, let me move this over, over to my HF Auto antenna tuner, which I use for the low bands. So it'll switch different bands, and it will switch everything over. If I go to 40 meters, it'll switch the antenna over. And it also does the same thing for my amplifier. So it sends the frequency over to my amplifier. The amplifier knows, oh yeah, okay, I need to be on port 1 for 6 meters. So that is, to me, this is the ultimate piece of software. It was so cheap, and I wish I had it sooner, but it's called Win for ICOM, for ICOM radios. And if you ever try to use a 7300 or anything like that, my problem is dexterity. I mean, there's just too many little pull downs and push this button, push that button to get to that and this. I guess you could figure it out after a while, but this has got everything laid out for you, right? I mean, you can just change bands. You've got, you can use your RIT or your TX transmitter change slightly. You've got different filter settings over here. You got the noise blanker, and you also have the noise reduction thing over here as well. So I mean, if you're going to use it as a receiver, I'm just using it as a transmitter. I just use the RF over here, and I can change the mic level or any of those other type of things very easily. So does that make sense to everybody, or have I lost everybody? If nobody says anything, then I'm in trouble.
No, the good thing is what you showed us there was exactly what I was explaining, that you can click on either the rig or your SDR console, and everything acts as one.
Yep, everything's
so
sync.
there's no need to say I don't want dual receives, because I know you don't use your 7300 to receive, but there's no need for most of us to say you don't need dual receives, because it's easy. It all talks to each other.
Roger that. And then this memories thing is really cool, because I always knock the dial. So here I just hit to click one of these things, and it brings me right back to whatever. And it has all these different memory banks. So you can have a gazillion memories in there. If you know where they are, you can change frequencies or bands really quickly by just using the memory slot over here. Anyway, I've talked too much. I just wanted to share that.
The Win for K4 does the same thing, has the same exact screen.
Perfect. Yeah, it's fun. It's good. It's,
Yeah.
it's like an Swiss Army knife.
Okay, so Marv, back to your question. I think you're referring to this screen.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, to get that, that's the home screen. Okay. You see in the top corner here, it says View. There's a tab in the top corner.
Okay.
You need to go into the View tab and then come all the way over here, and you have these 3 buttons. If you click on there, more options come up. And one of the options, and again, I go through this on the step-by-step that will be on the SDR Switch website. I go through how to do this and how to load it. But one of the options is that you can load external radio, or operate external radio. And that is where you get the Omni rig, and you get all of these settings. So it will come up, you download Omni rig onto your radio from Alex's website. It's free. There may be even a PayPal if you want to drop Alex some change. SDR Switch closes down, you open it back up again, and then that gives you access to this window here. And in this window here, you'll see there's a question mark sign. If you click on that question mark, all of this opens up for you. So it won't have this pane. It'll just have this back pane here. But then click on OmniRig, and this pop-up opens up, and you can get all your settings there.
Yeah, and I have it downloaded, and when I open OmniRig, the rig 1 and rig 2 is the only thing that opens. I was just, I don't remember seeing the other panels. So thank you very much, Paul.
Yep, no problem. That's what tonight's about, is questions. So next. No? Okay. Well, let's go on to why you're all here. 340,000 versus $100. This is Greg from RNS, and he was kind enough to spend most of the conference testing all different pieces of gear that I took down to the conference. And we put them on this RNS, and I have a Nano VNA at home. So this is a version 2, which I know one of the guys has just bought. He was telling me earlier on that it's going to wane. It's going to be in the mail tomorrow for him. And this is what the Nano looks like inside, to see if you're taking yours apart. The big complaint I hear about the Nano here is it's got a little screen. Well, it hasn't. This has got a little screen, because this I run on my 55-inch TV. And if I can't see it on there, then I've got more problems. So this is what the screen print from Greg's RNS looks like. This is what my software on my computer looks like with my Nano. Nano VNA Saver. Nano VNA Saver is the software that I use. And we have very similar things, except I've just got one sweep showing on mine. Greg's got 2 sweeps showing on his. This is the VSWR, the return loss, but we've got it explained as VSWR because most of us understand VSWR better. So on mine, this is showing the VSWR. And also up here, for each frequency, it shows the VSWR. Greg's got them all on his RNS, he's got them all here. This is the insertion loss, which is very, very important. You know, this is how much you lose, signal you lose by going through in this case, I'm on an SDR switch. So you can see on 6 meters, 0.0068 dB is the loss of this particular SDR switch. It's a 0.4. It's a 0 to 450 megahertz one. I measure it up here as well. You can see here. These might not be the same one. So here's my figure of 0.82. The other thing that you will measure, and it's not on this picture, we'll go later, is the isolation between the 2 ports. So you know if you're going to blow your SDR up or whatever you're measuring up. So this is the 0 to 70 megahertz SDR switch from the antenna to the transmitter. And I'll flip through these. You can have a look at them on when Paul goes through and puts it online, you can actually stop and look at them. But I'll go through these very quickly because the last page has got the information we're interested in. So this is comparing the same box. I actually think this is Wayne's box, N2EME. I think this is his, but I can't say, I don't want to say for sure. So the $340,000 RNS said that on 6 meters, it has a 1 to 1.070 SDR. My $100 Nano measured it at 1.085. I have an insertion loss of 0.0015. I measured it as 0.059. And again, you know, we can go through on 144. I got a VSWR of 1.2. The RNS got a 1.2. The Nano got a 1.297. So almost identical. And the insertion loss, he came up with a 0.2. I came up with a 0.12. And we did this again. Yes.
Are you using the same calibration standards when you go to do your cal on both devices, you know, the same ones?
No, this is showing you what Greg can do with, you know, calibration standards that cost more than my house.
That's what I'm getting at.
I'm showing you what you can do with when you buy a $100 Nano LNA. So one of them is Dream World. You know, Barbie lives in this world, and the rest of us live in this world. So it's the comparison is a Nano VNA worth it for a ham, or do we just say save your $100 and wait and test it next time there's a conference? So again, we did the same thing on the receive. You know, I on the 0 to 70, I have he has 1.006, I have 1.005. I'm not going to go through all the numbers on this page. Isolation is the other thing we were interested in. And this is how much signal seeps through. And I did this, I went through with Wayne the other day. We were looking at how much signal seeps through, and we started doing the counting back and how many noughts you have once you start getting above 30 dB of isolation. Considering that the SDR switch is 100 watts output or throughput, then we wanted to work out how much is going to come back and will it destroy things. So Greg on the RNS has 37 dB, a minus 37 dB, so 37 dB of isolation, but it shows you as a negative number. I have 31 dB on the Nano. We did the same thing then on the 0 to 450 megahertz SDR switch. So on 432, he had an SDR of 1.3, and I have an SDR of 1.29. Pretty close. He has an isolation of an insertion loss of 0.6. I have an insertion loss of 0.574. And we did this on various tests on all of the settings, and we put together this chart. Well, I put together this chart. So this is the RNS. It's VSWR, insertion loss, and isolation. This is the Nano. VSWR, insertion loss, isolation. So you can look down the chart and say, okay, on the 0 to 450, on 50 megs, he couldn't even measure it. It was so close to zero insertion loss because it's using those really good blue relays. I have a 0.1. His isolation was minus 0.54. I'm minus 0.50. Sorry, his height was minus 54. I'm minus 50. Reality, once you get past 30 at 100 watts, it's not making that much difference. So is the Nano worth $100 compared with waiting for the conference? There's the figures in front of you. I've never seen anybody do this as far as they put a one-on-one comparison with, well, I think that machine's worth twice my house. And comparing it with a $100 watt Nano. So I'll leave it up to you guys to work out whether it's worth it. And Paul, can you mute me? I've lost my button. Can you mute me?
Yes, stand by. I can mute you. Just a second. There you go. You're muted. I hope that helped. Anyway, yeah, I was just looking on Amazon. They got that model VNA-F V2 for $147.99 with 2 days shipping. So that's for Prime. So I'm really seriously thinking of getting that because that sounds like fun. I can check my SWR and find out what's wrong with it.
Oh, one
Was there
thing
any
to be aware of This is N2EME. There are a lot of Chinese clones of that device floating around, which are absolute garbage.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you have an official device and not a clone. I don't work for RNL. I'm just a big fan. RNL sells the original device. I have one of theirs, and they're fairly cheap. Just FYI, my 2 cents.
I'll second that because I had a friend of mine just buy one, and he doesn't have an original, and he's having problems trying to get the software to work, and there's no way to update the software or the firmware.
Well, that's good to know. I appreciate that. That's
And
saving you getting into trouble.
I will 100% agree with everything said there. You can upgrade the software, though, the firmware, I believe, because I've gone in and changed it. When mine initially came in, it was good up to 1 gigahertz, and I went in and changed it to 1.5 gigahertz. So I think that would have been done in the firmware. I'm not sure, but DX Engineering sell them, and again, RNL are the main importer for the USA.
So what's the exact? I'm just trying to make sure I get the right model number. I'm on the RNLs, or I'm on their site, and I'm not sure which version we're looking.
I didn't see it on the RNL. I took a quick look beforehand, and I didn't see the the Nano F on there.
Okay.
But I may have just missed it. It's on the DX Engineering site.
All right, good. Well, we can always call them tomorrow and find out.
And I paid $100 for
the
mine.
short open and load. You want to have good standards to do a proper cal.
So what do you need?
You need, there's the SMA connectors, right, that are on the VNA. So you'll need a short, an open, and a load in an SMA. But you want those rated a little bit higher in frequency than the highest frequency you want the VNA to operate on. So if it's got an extremely good SWR, let's say 6 gig, it's going to be fine for all your lower frequency work.
Where do you get these loads?
It might be with that kit, but you can also, I forgot the manufacturers. There's some, if you go on to Mauser or DigiKey, you can find them, and they'll give you specs. And so look at the 3 gig or the 6 gig spec for an SMA, short, open, and load.
Got it.
And as Marv asked me during the talk on that part, I used the ones, when I was doing the measurements, the cals, I used the ones that came with the VNA that I bought. I bought the F, which was why it was 100, because I bought it a while ago. It's not the F2. And I deliberately used what came with the setup because I wanted to show what the normal ham would see, rather than, you know, someone who's got a good set of standards. But I agree totally with Marv, you know, a good set of standards are going to test it. But I wanted to show what the average ham out of the box sees.
Yeah, my kit from RNL came with the cal, the open, short, and load.
And don't bother trying to use the front panel and try to touch the front panel of the VNA. It's just so small, you're not really going to see. Just download VNA server, Nano VNA server. It's free software, and use that instead. It's far easier to use.
Which model did you get from VNA? I mean, say, which one did you get from RNL? Do you know what the model number was?
Yeah, I got it right here. It's the 4H, I believe is the, yeah, it's Nano VNA 4H.
Got it.
And I've had it for a while. I don't know what revision they're up to, The 4 is the display size. And the H, I think, is a revision.
Got it.
I use it all the time.
I learned a lot tonight.
Well, I think we can agree that for most of what we're going to do as hams, those figures are pretty close to each other.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'll put those after the weekend. I'm at a ham fest this weekend, but after the weekend, I'll put those slides on the SDR switch page so you can actually go through and look and compare the numbers and see how they look without me talking over the top of them. You're muted, Paul.
I know. Yeah. Hey, come on, guys, more questions. I mean, don't miss the opportunity here. There's no such thing as a silly question. Remember that. Because I use them all the time.
This is Jim again, AB3CV. As I got this stuff working, again, not with any RF input yet because I need my splitter. But I did some testing to see how well things would work through OmniRig, and they work quite well. On a K4, you have multiple ports you can run control of the rig in. So I have DX Labs Commander running in typically into COM3. I stuck OmniRig into COM4, and everything syncs up pretty nicely. Although every once in a while, things sort of go off a little bit, like a few hundred hertz, and I'm not sure why. So I have to reestablish the rig's frequency again in one of the many WSJT or smart SDR console panels. But it gets there, and I'm sort of okay there. The other thing I was trying is, okay, so if I find something decoded on my K4, the instance of the WSJT for that just operates as normal. It keys the radio, puts out output through the sound card, and everything's fine. I found that it was a little hit or miss whether when I set up the instance for the Smart SDR or SDR box, I have the output of that also going to the K4's sound card, and it did in fact put out the proper tone. I had a friend at the listing for me, and I had a tone coming out on the K4 with the K4's instance of WSJT coming out at 1 kilohertz tone, and I had a 1500 hertz as I expected coming out from the instance that was listening to the SDR. So that seems to work, except when it doesn't. And I haven't quite figured out yet why. I don't know if it's a ownership fight between the two pieces of software over who owns the output codec or not. I suspect that's not the case, simply because too often you hear people smearing their WSJT signals with shack audio, whether it's music or voice or something, or their wife calling them for dinner. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, but there seems to be a little bit of back and forth. The reason that's concerning is because if I'm chasing DX and I'm not sure where I'm going to see it. If I see it on the K4's instance, I'll take it. If I see it on the Smart SDR or the SDR instance, I'll take it. But I just want the rig to do the right thing in spitting out audio. And in the instances, you don't get synchronization of the receive slot, which is obvious because one might not be receiving it well and the other one might be. But you don't get syncing of the transmit slot. So if you've got your rig, your transceiver rig set up to transmit at 1500 or 1600 or whatever, I usually have it set to hold frequency. So I find a clean spot and put myself there. You need to do the same thing over on the instance for the SDR. That took a little while to figure out. The good news is Spot Collector, part of DX Labs, will paint both instances and take logging commands from both instances. So, or either instance, excuse me. So if things are working right, and I hope they will, I'll find out for sure next week. This should be pretty painless to try to operate this way and spend some time getting some good comparisons.
And hopefully you'll send those over to the group so we can see how you're getting on.
Yeah, my initial thing I'm going to do is I've decided I'm going to spend a lot of time on FT8 first, because there's a lot of targets of opportunity, shall we say. Even just people around the States blasting away on 20 meters. Once I get everything working nice and solid there, then I think I'm going to try to run some skeds with some guys off of Moon on Q65 and see how it compares.
One of the things that wasn't talked about tonight, and Paul Newt brought this up a year and a half, 2 years ago, was by utilizing SDR Console, you can actually run 2 instances of FT8 on the same frequency, but one instance you could use WSJTX, the other you could use JTDX. So in your case, you could run your K4, WSJTX, and JTDX to see which one actually hears the station out there, which is absolutely amazing.
I understand that possibility. I'll withhold my comments on JTTX. It's a hostile fork.
Yeah, it's just having the ability to even use or compare, let's say, the WSJTX or the improved WSJTX against each other is just, it's an amazing test tool.
Yeah, it is. Agreed. Well, I'm going to go do an eyelid inspection. I'll be signing off here, guys. Take care. It was a good meeting. Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. Good night. And over to you to close it, Paul, unless there's any more questions.
All right. Well, we had a good crowd tonight, and thank you very much for everybody attending. And I'll have this. I'm going to be out of town tomorrow, so it'll probably be tomorrow night or Friday before I get it onto the YouTube page. But don't worry, it'll get there. So thanks for everybody for coming along tonight, and we will have some more interesting talks coming up in the future, and we'll get that out to you guys as well. I'm going to stop the recording now.